Why spiritual women are magnets for narcissistic men. There's a reason your heart is so big. There's a reason you keep believing in love, healing, growth, and purpose, even after being shattered. But listen to me, your light can either heal a soul or attract a predator. And too many spiritual women, empaths, healers, nurturers, find themselves entangled in the web of narcissistic men who feed off that divine energy. Why does this happen? Why does your beautiful heart seem to attract people who want to tear it apart? Light draws both moths and mosquitoes. When a woman awakens spiritually, something inside her shifts. She begins to radiate with a frequency that's impossible to fake. It's grace, it's love, it's presence. People can feel it even when she's silent. Her soul begins to speak before her words do. That kind of energy can calm storms, but it can also stir shadows, and that's where the danger begins. You were taught that being loving would make you safe, that being kind would earn you loyalty, that being open-hearted would draw people who appreciate you. But what no one told you is that your light would also become a beacon for brokenness. People who don't want to change, don't want to grow, don't want to heal, but want to feed. Narcissistic men don't see your love. They see fuel. They don't walk into your life asking, how can I cherish her? They walk in subconsciously scheming, how can I use her? Not always maliciously, but often automatically. They sense what you don't even know you're projecting, that you'll forgive easily, that you'll fight for love, that you'll stay when things get hard. And to a narcissist, that's not inspiring. That's exploitable. You become their sanctuary, not because they worship your soul, but because they want refuge from their own emptiness. You offer them empathy, they give you manipulation. You bring them peace, they bring you chaos. You open your heart, they begin construction on a throne to sit in it. It starts with admiration but turns into domination, and the scariest part, they don't always do it violently, they do it with charm, with stories, with pain that mirrors yours. They know exactly what to say to trigger your compassion. They paint themselves as misunderstood, deep in need of love. And because you're spiritual, you give them the benefit of the doubt. Again and again, until one day you realize you're drained, you're depleted, you're not you anymore, but even then you still question yourself. Was I too harsh? Am I judging? Is this a test of my unconditional love? You search for spiritual meaning in what is clearly psychological abuse. You wrestle with guilt because your spiritual path taught you to see the good in everyone. But now you're learning. Some people wear masks so perfectly, even angels are fooled. You've got to understand that your light doesn't just attract people who want to rise. It attracts people who want to hide. Your light exposes them to themselves, and they hate that. So what do? They try to dim it. They confuse you, destabilize you, chip away at your joy, and the more disoriented you become, the more control they gain. It becomes a cycle of energy exchange. You pour in, they drain out. You hold space, they fill it with chaos. You think love will heal them, but they see love as weakness. And the longer you stay, the more they rewrite your identity. You forget your power, you shrink your voice. You doubt your intuition, and suddenly, you don't recognize the woman in the mirror anymore. This is not about victimhood. This is about awakening. It's about realizing that you don't have to burn in order to keep others warm. It's about setting boundaries without feeling guilty. It's about honoring your spirit without sacrificing your sanity. Your light was never meant to be a lure. It was meant to be a lighthouse warning ships of dangerous shores. When you truly own your energy, you stop being available to people who only want to consume it. You stop explaining your worth. You stop negotiating your peace. You stop giving VIP access to people who haven't done the work to earn it. You don't dim your light. You guard it like the sacred fire it is. The truth is, you are not too much. You are just too bright for people who refuse to open their eyes. You are not broken for attracting them. You are wise for finally recognizing the pattern. This isn't about closing your heart. It's about becoming a warrior with one. From this moment forward, you protect your light not with fear, but with fierce discernment. You walk in your power without apology. You lead with love, but not at the cost of your own destruction. Because the real test of your spirit is not how long you stay, it's how boldly you walk away when your soul is under siege. You're not here to be devoured by darkness. You're here to dismantle it with your presence. But first, you have to stop letting it into your home, your heart, and your head. You were not made to bleed for the broken. You were made to rise and lead the healed. And that begins with you. The narcissist sees her soul as a stage. A spiritual woman isn't just beautiful, she's transcendent. She doesn't enter a room, she shifts it. Her presence carries the weight of someone who's stared into her own darkness and chosen to rise. She listens with her whole being. She forgives with her whole heart. And most dangerously of all, she believes people can change. That belief is the crack the narcissist slides through. You have to understand something most people miss. A narcissist isn't just hunting for attention. They're hunting for reflection. They're empty inside. Their sense of self is an illusion, a mask made of mirrors. So when they meet a spiritual woman, they don't see a person. They see a stage, a platform, a spotlight they can stand in to feel real for a moment. They're drawn to the energy you radiate because it makes them feel alive. Not because they want to share life with you, but because they want to borrow yours. You become the mirror that makes them feel special, wise, worthy. But once you stop applauding, once you stop clapping for their performance, the curtain falls, and the punishment begins. At first, they idealize you. You're their goddess, their soulmate, their answer to every wound. But this is the trick. They're not really seeing you. They're seeing what you make them feel. The moment you become human, with needs and limits and pain of your own, they resent you for it. The applause stops, the illusion shatters, and that's when the devaluation begins. Suddenly, you're too sensitive, too emotional, too spiritual. Everything they once praised becomes a flaw. They pick apart your words, twist your intentions, and accuse you of the very things they're doing. They build a false narrative where you're the villain and they're the victim, all because you stopped being the stage and started being a person. This is the narcissist's deepest fear, that they will be seen without the mask. And when a spiritual woman loves deeply, she sees deeply. She sees the cracks. She sees the insecurity. She sees the little boy behind the bravado. And instead of honoring her insight, he punishes her for it. Because your vision threatens his illusion, but here's what they never expected, that one day you'd see through them and still walk away. That one day you'd stop blaming yourself for the performance crashing. That you'd reclaim your spotlight, not to illuminate them, but to honor yourself. And that's when your power ignites. The mistake wasn't your depth. The mistake was handing the microphone to someone who only wanted to hear their own echo. You were never meant to be the background dancer in someone else's drama. You were born to lead the show of your own soul. The more spiritual you become, the more boundaries you must build. Not walls of fear, but filters of wisdom. Because not everyone who's drawn to your light wants to walk in it. Some want to use it, some want to dim it, some want to replace it with a spotlight of their own. And that is where you rise up and say, not in my energy, not on my stage. A spiritual woman doesn't need an audience. She doesn't need validation. She doesn't need to carry someone else's emptiness like it's her spiritual assignment. She knows now discernment is divine, boundaries are holy, and not everyone deserves front row seats to her sacred journey. It's time to stop letting narcissists audition for a role in your life they were never qualified to play. You're not here to be their platform. You're here to be your own sanctuary. And when you do that, you don't attract users. You attract warriors. You attract truth. You attract men who bring mirrors, not masks. Let the narcissist look for another show. Yours is closed. The stage is sacred. The soul is guarded. And your heart, it now beats for peace, not performance. Her healing energy feeds his inner void. When a spiritual woman walks into a room, she carries more than just presence. She brings healing. It's not always conscious. It's not always deliberate, but it's real. Her energy is like medicine for a fractured world, and the narcissist smells it like a wolf in the wild. hungry, desperate, starving for a hit of something real. She doesn't just love people, she restores them. She doesn't just listen, she hears beneath the words. She doesn't just see faces, she sees souls. That's power. And a narcissist, broken and hollow as they are inside, craves that power, but not to grow, not to evolve, only to consume it. Because where she is full, he is empty. This is the tragic magnetism between a narcissist and a spiritual woman. Her light promises to fill what he lacks. Her groundedness soothes his chaos. Her intuition calms the war within him. And because she's built a life on compassion and healing, she takes it on like a mission. She thinks, I can help him. I can love him into wholeness. But he's not there for healing. He's there for fuel. The narcissist sees her like a human battery. As long as she's charged, glowing, and giving, he clings. He mirrors her energy. He praises her light. He even pretends to evolve. But it's a performance. He's not transforming, he's feeding, and as her energy drains, he starts to resent her for needing to recharge. The same healing he once worshipped becomes a threat. He accuses her of being too emotional, too spiritual, too intense. But what he really means is, you're starting to see through me, and I can't handle it. Her healing energy, once his lifeline, now exposes his sickness. And instead of thanking her, he blames her for the emptiness she never caused in the first place. Spiritual women often mistake this drain for love. They think, if he's this hurt, I must be his safe space. But true love doesn't deplete. It doesn't bleed you dry. And the moment you feel like you're drowning while someone else floats on your back, you've left love and entered manipulation. Narcissists don't want partners, they want providers of emotional oxygen, and spiritual women, because they're wired to heal, often stay far longer than they should, telling themselves that it's spiritual to endure. But endurance without reciprocity isn't spiritual. It's self-abandonment dressed in divine language. Your energy is sacred. Your light is not a public utility. Your healing is not a buffet for broken men who refuse to lift their own burdens. You are not here to be drained. You are here to awaken. And the first awakening is this. Just because someone is drawn to your energy doesn't mean they deserve access to it. The truth is, some people aren't drawn to your love because they want to cherish it. They're drawn to it because they want to feed off it. They confuse healing with hosting. They don't want to grow. They want a place to hide while they avoid themselves, and a spiritual woman becomes the perfect host until she realizes she's housing someone who never had intentions of changing. But here's the breakthrough when she finally cuts off the supply, not in hate but in truth. Everything changes. The narcissist panics. He runs to the next source. He'll call her cold, unloving, cruel. But she knows now that's not cruelty, that's clarity. And when a spiritual woman chooses clarity over chaos, she reclaims her power. She learns that her healing is a gift for the willing, not a lifeline for the toxic. She understands that energy isn't infinite, and those who waste it aren't entitled to it. The lesson isn't to stop being spiritual. The lesson is to stop bleeding for people who are stabbing you, to stop believing your love can save someone who refuses to look at their own wounds. You're not here to be someone's escape. You're here to be a mirror, a teacher, a sanctuary for those who are ready. So let him starve for your energy. Let him thirst for your peace. That's not your burden anymore. The healing he seeks, it was never your job to deliver. It was his journey to start. Her empathy makes her vulnerable to his manipulation. Empathy is a superpower. It's what allows a spiritual woman to walk into someone's pain and sit with it, unafraid. It's what makes her ask, "What happened to you?" instead of "What's wrong with you?" It's the bridge between her soul and another's suffering. But like all power, it comes with risk. And in the hands of a narcissist, her empathy becomes the very tool used to trap her. Narcissists are experts at reading energy. They don't feel deeply themselves, but they study people who do. And when they spot empathy, they see opportunity. To the narcissist, an empathic woman isn't a partner. She's a resource. A source of endless second chances. A place where accountability dies in the name of compassion. He tests her boundaries early, subtly. He drops a sad story, a tragic past, a wound from childhood. He dangles his brokenness like bait. And because she's spiritual, she doesn't judge. She reaches out. She says, I see you. And that's all he needs. He knows now. She'll put his pain before her peace. She believes love is healing. She believes hurt people hurt people. So she rationalizes his red flags as trauma responses. She rewrites his cruelty as wounded behavior. She tells herself, if I just love him harder, he'll change. But narcissists don't respond to love. They consume it, and then blame you when they're still empty. Empathy without boundaries becomes self-destruction, and that's what he counts on. He twists her caring nature into guilt. He says things like, you're supposed to be spiritual, and you're judging me. Or, if you really loved me, you'd understand. He flips her values against her. He turns her light into a leash, and because she's committed to inner work, she questions herself more than she questions him. She wonders if she's being too harsh, too reactive, too unforgiving. But he never asks those questions. He never self-reflects, because his goal was never growth. It was control, and her empathy was the access point. It takes time for her to see it, because she keeps looking at who he could be, not who he is. She keeps treating the relationship like a mission, not a mirror. But eventually, the scales fall. She realizes, my compassion isn't helping him, it's hurting me. And that's when the shift begins. She starts setting boundaries. She starts pulling back. She stops over-explaining and over-apologizing. And he can't stand it. Because without her empathy to hide behind, his true self is exposed. And the truth is ugly. He never wanted her love. He wanted her compliance. But the beautiful thing about spiritual women is this. Once they wake up, they don't go back to sleep. Once they see the game, they flip the board. Once they understand that empathy must be paired with discernment, they become untouchable. She learns that love without truth is not love. It's enablement. She understands that empathy isn't about sacrificing yourself to soothe someone else's chaos. It's about being present without abandoning yourself. And when she finally puts that into practice, everything changes. The narcissist can't reach her anymore. His guilt trips bounce off. His sob stories lose their grip. His rage no longer shakes her. Because she's not operating from guilt anymore. She's anchored in self-respect. And self-respect is the line that narcissists can't cross. Her empathy is still there. But now it has teeth. Now it says, I feel for your pain, but I won't let you poison mine. It says, I can love you from afar and protect myself up close. It says, I will never again confuse suffering with sainthood. This is where her power becomes unshakable. Not because she stopped being empathetic, but because she stopped allowing it to be used as a weapon against her. She no longer bleeds for people who cut her. She no longer heals men who refuse to help themselves, and that shift, that's where liberation lies. Her desire to heal draws her into his darkness. Spiritual women are natural healers. They don't just love, they restore. They don't just support, they rebuild. Their hearts are not content with surface-level connection. They dive into the deep end of people's souls and pull out the pain others try to hide. That's a gift. But that gift can also be the very thing that chains them to a narcissist. A narcissistic man thrives on chaos, but he cloaks it in charm. He doesn't say, come fix my dysfunction. No, he presents himself as someone who's just misunderstood, someone who never had real love, someone who's been abandoned. And to the spiritual woman, that sounds like a mission. She believes in second chances. She believes in redemption stories. She believes people can evolve if they're truly loved. And so she puts on the armor of compassion and walks into his wounded world, thinking love will be enough. But she doesn't realize she's stepping into a trap dressed like a project, because the narcissist doesn't want healing, he wants attention. He doesn't want to grow, he wants control. He doesn't want partnership, he wants power. And what better target than a woman who sees his brokenness and believes she was sent to repair it? She starts sacrificing her peace for his potential. She quiets her needs to accommodate his instability. She explains away his disrespect, justifies his moods, and convinces herself he's just going through something. But what he's going through isn't temporary, it's a pattern. And patterns don't break with pity. The more she gives, the more he takes. The more she forgives, the more he betrays. She's not in a relationship anymore, she's in a rescue mission. And the moment she tries to draw the line, he flips it. He accuses her of giving up, of not being spiritual enough, of not practicing what she preaches. She doesn't just feel sad, she feels responsible. Like his healing is her burden to carry. And that's how the narcissist wins. Not with fists, but with false promises. Not with threats, but with guilt. He weaponizes her own goodness against her. Over time, the woman who used to meditate in peace is now praying for survival. The one who used to help others awaken is now trapped in confusion. She's drained, disoriented, and doubting herself because every attempt to help him turns into another layer of pain for her. But there comes a moment when her soul whispers louder than his manipulation. A moment when she looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize the woman staring back. A moment when she realizes healing is not something you can force on someone, especially someone who's addicted to their own destruction. She finally understands healing must be chosen, growth must be owned, and she cannot pour from a cup that he keeps shattering. She can love him and still leave him. She can pray for him and still protect herself. That's not cold, that's wise. She rises, and when she does, it's not because she stopped loving. It's because she started loving herself more. She sees that her gift is sacred, her light is rare, and her purpose was never to fix a man who refuses to face his own mirror. Now her healing energy is reserved for people who honor it. Her compassion is no longer for sale to those who only exploit it, and her presence becomes a place of discernment, not just devotion. The narcissist will hate this. He'll call her selfish. He'll say she abandoned him. He'll twist the story, but it won't matter. Because once a spiritual woman knows her worth, no amount of guilt can chain her to a man who refuses to rise. She doesn't stop being a healer. She just stops wasting medicine on someone who fakes the symptoms but refuses the cure. And that shift, that's not just empowerment, that's a rebirth. Her faith in transformation blinds her to his true nature. A spiritual woman walks with the deep belief that transformation is possible. She knows darkness is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of light. She sees every soul as sacred, every wound as a chance for rebirth, and every relationship as a divine appointment for growth. But that unshakable faith, that soul, deep optimism, can sometimes blind her to the truth staring her in the face. Narcissists don't enter your life dressed as villains. They show up wearing masks of vulnerability, of potential, of spiritual curiosity. They say the right things, they mirror your values, they act like they're on the same path. And because she believes in the goodness of all beings, she leans in. She sees who he could become, not who he really is. Her faith tells her everyone can change. Her heart whispers, he just needs love. And her soul, hungry to witness transformation, keeps holding space for a man who's not interested in evolving, he's interested in controlling. She confuses his charm for growth, his trauma for depth, and his manipulation for emotional complexity. Every time he disappoints her, she doesn't confront the reality, she doubles down on the fantasy. She tells herself, this is just his shadow side, we all have one. She justifies the pain as a test. She frames his disrespect as resistance to healing. And before long, she's living in a story, not a relationship. Her faith becomes a filter. Instead of seeing his gaslighting, she sees his potential. Instead of recognizing the emotional abuse, she tells herself she's being triggered. Instead of leaving, she stays because she thinks she's helping him evolve. But narcissists don't transform through love. They just learn how to mimic what you want so they can keep extracting what they need. The tragedy is this: the more she invests in the illusion, the harder it becomes to face the truth. She's not in love with him, she's in love with the idea of who he might one day be. She's not being loyal, she's being loyal to a future that will never arrive, and that loyalty is costing her sanity, her joy, her very identity. But eventually, something snaps. Maybe it's the 1,000th lie. Maybe it's the way he turns the blame every time she expresses her pain. Maybe it's the realization that she's praying for his growth more than he's even thinking about it. And she wakes up, not all at once, but deeply, unmistakably. She begins to question the version of faith she's been living. Not faith in transformation itself, but faith without discernment. She sees that not everyone wants to change. Not everyone is ready. And some people weaponize your hope to keep you tied to their dysfunction. That realization hits hard. It feels like betrayal, like a sacred belief has been shattered, but in truth it's the start of her liberation. Because once she removes the blindfold of fantasy, she sees him clearly, not as a soul in progress, but as a soul who's made a choice to harm, to deceive, to control. She forgives herself for staying. She honors the love that kept her hoping, but she no longer lets that hope keep her hostage. Her faith doesn't die, it evolves. It becomes rooted. It stops chasing potential and starts protecting her peace. Now, when she meets a man, she doesn't just ask, "What has he been through?" She asks, "What is he doing with it?" She doesn't get swept away by deep words, she watches for deep actions. She no longer sees someone's brokenness as a mission. She sees it as their responsibility, and in that strength, her energy changes. She radiates a new kind of light, not just warm, but wise, not just open, but guarded by truth. She becomes the woman who can still love deeply, still believe in change, but never again sacrifice herself for someone who refuses to rise. To the narcissist, she is no longer prey. She is power. She is presence. She is clarity. And that is terrifying to him, because the one thing he cannot control is a woman who has stopped ignoring the truth in the name of potential. This woman still believes in transformation, but only for those who choose it. She still carries hope, but never again for someone who uses it to hide. And most of all, she still walks in love, but love that includes herself first. And that is the greatest transformation of all. From target to triumph, the rise of the spiritual warrior. You've heard the truth now, not the sugar-coated version. Not the version that protects your illusions, but the raw, piercing truth that breaks chains. If you are a spiritual woman, you have been a magnet for narcissists, not because you're weak, but because your strength is radiant, your love is deep, your heart is open, your energy is divine, and they come not to celebrate it, they come to consume it. But the time for being prey is over. You were not born to be a fixer of broken men who refuse to heal. You were not created to be a well that keeps pouring into a bottomless pit. You were not designed to sacrifice your peace on the altar of someone else's ego. You are not a rehab center for souls that reject accountability. You are a temple, a warrior, a light bearer. Every time you stayed too long, every time you believed in the mask instead of the man, every time you silenced your intuition for the sake of hope, you weren't failing. You were learning the battlefield, learning the enemy, learning yourself. And now that you've awakened, the cycle breaks with you. You see, the narcissist chose you because your energy was pure. But now that energy is not just pure, it is powerful, it is discerning, it is armored in wisdom. You no longer love blindly, you love bravely, and with boundaries. You no longer see potential, you demand proof. You don't just look at their soul, you listen to their patterns. and you are no longer available for pain that masquerades as passion. This is your rising. This is your turning point. The spiritual woman is no longer the magnet for narcissistic men. She is the fire that burns their illusions to ash. She is no longer drawn to pain dressed as purpose. She is called to purpose dressed in peace. She doesn't chase. She doesn't beg. She doesn't shrink. She remembers who she is, and when she remembers, everything changes. The narcissist loses his grip. The patterns lose their power. The wounds start to heal. And the woman who once bent over backward to prove her worth now walks in rooms with a quiet fire that says, I know who I am, I know what I carry, and I will never again abandon myself for love. So if you've been that woman, the healer, the believer, the one who stayed too long, hear this loud and clear. You are not broken. You were never weak. You were just powerful in a world that tried to shame your light. But now you're unstoppable. You've alchemized the pain. You've reclaimed your voice. And your spirit is no longer a target, it is a torch. Carry it, light the way, and never again let a man dim what God lit inside you. The era of the spiritually wounded woman is over. The spiritual warrior has arrived.